Directions: solve each equation by the method of your choice. Round solutions to the nearest hundredth if necessary. All right, you will notice that I did when I spoke to you today that we have to actually use every method. So we will use square root, we will use graphing, we will use factoring, and we will use the quadratic formula. So as long as you've used each of them at least once, then you can go ahead and use your favorite method more than once, all right? And what I'm going to do as I go through here, I'll always do a couple methods in case you picked a different one than me. So I'll try to pick ones that I feel would be appropriate for the problem. All right, this first one I have 6x squared minus 19 equals 11. I'm going to actually work this one using square roots because the x term is missing. So if I'm going to solve this using square roots, I want to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to add 19 to both sides. So I will get 6x squared equals 30. And then we'll divide both sides by 6. So I'll get x squared is equal to 5. And then to get rid of the square, we'll take the square root of both sides. So I will square root both sides. I'll get x equals 2.24. So this will be x equals 2.24, and obviously we don't forget our positive negative. So that would be the answer. I'm going to show you if you decided I really like quadratic formula on this one instead, we would have to make this equal 0. So if I had 6x squared minus 19 equals 11, I would subtract 11. So I'd now get 6x squared minus 30 is equal to 0. And now from here, what we would do is label our A, B, and our C. So my A would be 6. My B, since there's no x term, would have to be 0. And my C would be negative 30. So setting up this formula, we'd have x equals opposite B. Well, the opposite of 0 is still just 0. Plus or minus square root. B squared, well, 0 squared is still 0. Minus 4AC all over 2a, and 2 times 6 is 12. So then if you used your calculator to type that in, when you did the plus, you'd get 2.24, and then the other one, you'd end up getting negative 2.24. So either way would be fine. All right, number 6, 4x squared plus 200 equals 44. Once again, I'll do this two ways. The first way that I'm going to do it is by square roots because, again, the x term is missing. So we are going to get the x squared by itself, so we'll subtract 200 from both sides. So I'll get 4x squared is equal to negative 196. I'll then divide both sides by 4, and I'll get x equals negative 49. And then when I go to square root, if I did that on my calculator, I will get non-real answer because we can't square root a negative number. So this is a no solution problem. All right, I just want to show you what it would look like if we did quadratic formula on this one, just in case you chose that method. If we're going to do quadratic formula, we have to make the equation equal 0. So I'm going to subtract 44 from both sides. So I'll get 4x squared plus 196 is equal to 0. And now again, I'm going to label my A, my B, and my C. My A is the 4. My B again is going to be 0 because there's no x term. And then my C is going to be 196. Then I'll get x equals opposite B, which would be 0, plus or minus square root. B squared would be 0, minus 4 times 196, because I did 4 times A times C, all over 2A. 2 times 4 is 8. All right, if you plug that in your calculator, you're going to get an error that says non-real answer. So once again, either way you work it, you get no solution. Right, number 7, we've got x plus 3 squared is equal to 36. I'm going to, again, work this a couple different ways. The first way that I'm going to work it is square roots again. So I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. When we do that, we're going to get x plus 3 is equal to, this one is going to be plus or minus 36. And so we really have two problems here. We have x plus 3 equals 36, and x plus 3 equals negative 36. And so if I were to solve this out, well, actually, that is not right because the square root of 36 is 6. Sorry about that. I'm going to subtract 3. We'll get x equals 3. And if I subtract 3 here, I'll get x is equal to negative 9. All right, another way that we could have worked this one, I can get it set up for the quadratic formula. What I would have to do first on this one is if it says x plus 3 squared, that really means x plus 3 times x plus 3, and so we'd have to multiply that. We can draw arrows or we can do our boxes, whichever way. If I do that, I'm going to end up getting x squared plus 6x plus 9, and that will equal 36. Well, if I'm going to use a quadratic formula, it must say equals 0, so I'm going to subtract 36 from both sides. Notice that I put the minus 36 by the 9 because they're like terms. So I'm going to have x squared plus 6x minus 27 is equal to 0. And then from here, if I was using the quadratic formula, I'd set up my a, my b, and my c. My a will be 1, my b will be 6, and my c is negative 27. So I get x equals opposite b, negative 6, plus or minus square root, b squared, 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, 2 times 1 is 2. And then if you plug that in your calculator, you will get two answers. One of the answers will be 3, and the other answer will be negative 9. Okay, problem number 8. On this one, I'm going to start this one. Actually, I think I will do a quadratic formula on this one. If I'm going to use a quadratic formula, we first of all have to let it equal 0. So if I let this equal 0, I'm going to have to subtract 9x from both sides. Okay, on the left side, I have to make sure I write everything in standard form. So 2x squared goes first, the minus 9x is going to go second, and then the minus 8 equals 0. Now, once I'm set like that, I can go ahead and identify my a, my b, and my c. My a will be 2, my b will be negative 9, my c will be negative 8. So I'm going to get x equals opposite b, so the opposite of negative 9 is 9, plus or minus square root, b squared. Negative 9 squared is 81. Do not put negative 9 squared right there because you will get a wrong answer. Minus 4 times a times c, don't forget the negatives, and then all over 2a. 2 times 2 is 4. So when we plug this in our calculator, one of the answers will be 5.201, and the other answer will be negative 0.761. And again, you could have rounded that to 5.2, and negative 0.76 would have been fine as well. All right, number 9, 5x plus 15x squared is equal to 0. I'm going to work this two different ways. The first way that I'm going to do it is factor, and then I will do the quadratic formula. So if I factor this, it does equal 0, so I'm set with that. And then I'd look at what number goes into both of them. 5 goes into both of them, and then they both have an x. So we're going to divide both of them by 5x, and if I do that, I'm going to get 1 plus 3x is equal to 0. And now this might look a little different because we're used to just taking the opposite, but one thing that I did say we could do is set both parts equal to 0. So I'm going to put 5x equals 0, and I'm going to put 1 plus 3x equals 0. Okay, so if I do that and if I solve this, I'll just divide by 5. I'll get x equals 0, so that's one answer. And then this one, we'd subtract 1 from both sides. I'll get 3x is equal to negative 1. And then if I divide by 3, I'll get x is equal to negative 1/3. So those would be my two answers. All right, let's do this the quadratic formula way. Okay, it is equal to 0, so we're set with that, but you'll notice this is not in standard form. So if I put it in standard form, the 15x squared has to come first, the 5x has to come second, and then it still equals 0. So then I'd label my parts, a equals, b equals, c equals. My a is going to be the 15, my b is going to be 5, my c, since there is nothing there, my c will be 0. So then if I use the formula, I'm going to get x equals opposite b, the opposite of 5 is negative 5, plus or minus square root, b squared, 5 squared is 25, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, 2 times 15 is 30. Okay, and when you do that, one of your answers will come out to be 0, and then the other answer, if you're using your calculator, would come out to be negative 0.3 repeating. So those would be your two answers either way. All right, problem 10, x squared plus 7x plus 10 is equal to 0. Again, I'm going to work this two ways. The first way I'm going to work it is by factoring. And I notice that this equals 0, so it's all set for factoring. It's a trinomial, so I know to do x. I'm going to take 1 times 10 and think what times what would give me 10. 1 times 10, 2 times 5, and I notice that 2 plus 5 does give me the 7 in the middle, so this is the choice I'm going to do. Now you have two things to do from here. Remember, if you factor, you're not done until you tell me what x equals. You could just take the opposite, so the opposite of positive 2 is negative 2, and the opposite of positive 5 is negative 5, or if that confuses you, just set each part equal to 0. So I'd put x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 5 equals 0. And when I subtract 2, notice I still get negative 2, And when I subtract 5, notice I still get negative 5. So either one is totally fine. All right, let's say this one you decided that you'd really like to do the quadratic formula on. We can do that too. Okay, it's already in standard form and it already equals 0, so we're all set. So A equals 1, B equals 7, C equals 10. So we'll set it up. X equals opposite B. The opposite of 7 is negative 7, plus or minus square root B squared. 7 squared is 49, minus 4AC, all over 2A. 2 times 1 is 2. And then if I were to type that in my calculator, I would first of all get, one of my answers would be negative 2, and my other answer would be negative 5. I forgot to do one of the problems using graphing, so I am going to go back to problem number 10. There's a couple of them that I could pick, but I did need to solve one of them by graphing. So I'm going to take this one. If I'm going to solve it by graphing, it does equal 0, and so I'm just going to graph the function x squared plus 7x plus 10, and if I do that, I will get a graph that looks like this. It's going to be a parabola that looks something like that, and then you'll recall if I'm solving by graphing, I'm just looking for where does it hit the x-axis, and you'll notice it hits at negative 2 and negative 5. So x is equal to negative 2 and x is equal to negative 5. So right, problem 11, 2x squared minus 5x minus 12 is equal to 0. I am just going to work this the quadratic formula way because I just really think that that would be the best way to go on this one. All right, so already in standard form, already equals 0, we're all set. So I'm going to set my A, my B, and my C. A is equal to 2, B is equal to negative 5, C is equal to negative 12. So I'm going to have x equals opposite B. The opposite of negative 5 is 5, plus or minus square root B squared. Negative 5 squared is 25, minus 4AC, so 4 times 2 times negative 12, all over 2A. 2 times 2 is 4. So if we do that, one of my answers will end up being 4, and my other answer will end up being negative 1.5. Okay, problem 12. X squared minus 27 is equal to 6x. Whether I do factoring or quadratic formula, we're going to have it equal 0, so I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. Notice none of these are like terms, so do not put them together. I'm just going to write them in order. X squared would go first, and then the minus 6x, and then the minus 27 is equal to 0. I'm now going to work this two ways because remember, you are going to have to work these problems some different ways. So if I factor this, again, this is going to be x. I'll be looking for 1 times negative 27, which is negative 27. Let's see, negative 9 times 3, negative 3 times 9. I think I found it already because negative 9 plus 3 gives me the negative 6 in the middle. And then once again, we have to say what x equals. So x is going to equal 9, and x is going to equal negative 3. And once again, if you don't get that we take the opposite, just set each part equal to 0 and solve for x, and you will get the same thing. All right, quadratic formula, it's all set up for quadratic formula. We just need to pick our A, B, and our C. A would be 1, B would be negative 6, C would be negative 27. So x equals opposite B, which would be 6, plus or minus square root B squared. Negative 6 squared is 36. Again, do not put negative 6 squared in there, put 36, minus 4AC, all over 2A. 2 times 1 is 2. And then if you were to work that out, one of your answers is going to be 9, and the other answer will be negative 3. All right, 13. We've got 8x squared is equal to 6x. First of all, whether I factored or use the quadratic formula, I'm going to have it equal 0. So I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. I'm going to end up getting 8x squared minus 6x is equal to 0. And then from here, I believe I'm going to use a quadratic formula on this one. Factoring gets a little messy on this. So if I use the quadratic formula, A, B, and C, my A will be 8, my B will be negative 6, and since there is nothing left, my C will be 0. So I'm going to have x equals opposite B. The opposite of negative 6 is 6, plus or minus square root B squared. Negative 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 8 times 0, all over 2A, all over 2 times 8, which is 16. And then from here, If I figure that out, one of my answers is going to end up being 0, and then the other answer is going to end up being 0.75. Right, problem 14, 3x squared plus 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. Once again, it's equal to 0. It's in standard form. I'm definitely going to use the quadratic formula on this one. So a equals 3, b equals 5, c equals 1. So here we go. We've got x equals opposite b, so negative 5, plus or minus square root. B squared, 5 squared is going to be 25, minus 4ac, 4 times 3 times 1, all over 2a. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. And then if I figure that out, one of my answers will be negative 0.23, and my other answer will be negative 1.43. Okay, problem 15, 16, and 17, we're not going to let those story problems give us any issues. We are going to have